Summer's supposed to be the easy season. So why are so many people quietly Googling a therapist between summer Fridays? Because more daylight doesn't fix the hard stuff. Sometimes it just turns the volume up. Grow does therapy differently. Therapy is not only for when you're in crisis. Grow Therapy is here for all the moments when you decide you want more. More support, more clarity, more tools. Mental health isn't a destination you reach, it's something you build, and Grow makes that easier. Grow connects you with thousands of high-quality licensed therapists across the U.S., offering both virtual and in-person sessions, nights and weekends. You can search by what matters, like insurance, specialty, identity, or availability, and get started in as little as 2 days. There are no subscriptions, no long-term commitments. You just pay per session. Grow helps you find therapy on your time. The therapist you want takes your insurance on Grow. Grow accepts over 125 insurance plans. Sessions average $21 with insurance, and some pay as little as $0 depending on their plan. Visit growtherapy.com/booknow today to get started. That's growtherapy.com/booknow. growtherapy.com/booknow. Availability and coverage vary by state and insurance plan.
911, what's the nature of your emergency?
Welcome back to the Tactical Living Podcast. I'm your host, Ashlie Walton, joined by Sergeant Walton. Clint, how are you?
I'm excellent.
I saw a post from a police wives Facebook group this morning, and it caught my attention because the first line was something along the lines of, I don't know how you police wives do it. And she went into detail and said that she married her husband. He's a police officer. She never signed up for this. He's working all the time. She never gets to see him. She has to eat dinner all alone, fall asleep all alone. All of the things that, in my opinion, are just kind of a consequence of the profession. And the first thing that stuck out to me is like the answer to that question, how do y'all do it? Well, don't you love that person?
I think that's the biggest question that people don't ask themselves on a regular basis. Like, why did you get involved in this relationship from the very, very beginning? And there's always going to be consequential things that happen in life is, shift work. You're missing holidays. You're missing out on key life moments. But at the same time, it's, you came together because you love one another and you want to support one another, and you should be building one another up on a regular basis instead of pushing each other away.
Yeah, if I were to take that female and I would have had the opportunity to say one thing to her before she ever even met that man, I would probably give her the knowledge that the spouse, the children, the families at home are the ones who hold everything together when you are in a relationship with a first responder. And the first responder is the one that's usually on shift and recovering from shift, or just mentally still on shift even when they're physically at home. And that's the reality of it. And so that, for most people, would be a challenge that would require you to come up against it in a way that you could be tactful and understanding. And for both parties involved would also require for you to have a significant amount of compromise.
Yeah. And that key word you said is that having that compromise with one another. And it comes from both sides. It's whether it's you're at home holding the household together, or you're at work and you're saying, okay, I need to work a little bit harder to come home to my family and being able to support them and be with them.
I have a really hard time when I hear females speak this way, because they're making this exception for first responders. And I'm saying that because I never hear military wives complain about things in that way. I never have once read a military wife comment saying, I never signed up for this. My husband got deployed, or he's at training for the next 3 months. Never once.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. I never considered that. Like, thinking about it is, they have their circle. They know what's going on, the ins and outs and things. And military personnel that, they're missing out on key things in life all the time. And there's so many similarities between the two. I think it's it's a community that we all need to come together and support one another with.
Yeah, and we can talk about the psychological concepts here, which is invisible labor and asymmetric family load. And as it relates to invisible labor, this is basically the cognitive and the emotional and the logistical work that's required to be able to manage a household and a family. And for a lot of people, this goes largely unseen because it happens in the background.
Yeah, and I think it also comes down to is it's not showing that love and support for one another. And like I said, it comes from both sides. There's those instances where the husband's at work all the time because they're not comfortable with being at home because of whatever environment's there, or they're having to work because of financial reasons, or they're wanting to be at home, but they're not putting forth that effort on either side because they want to love and support one another, but they're finding something. Well, I have this unity, I have this team here.
Yeah, and I think too that you as a female, I can speak for this. So when we grow up, we see the two people fall in love and then they get married and they have a house and perhaps kids and a dog and the white picket. We see this whole like American dream living out, right? And so for a lot of people, females in particular, they have this preconceived notion of what a marriage ought to be. And, I can say, I never really had that like fairy tale growing up. Like I was just so scholastic and just so into like studying and learning that it wasn't really like that for me. I was never into dolls and like, it wasn't like that for me, but for a lot of women it is. And so I think that when you and I first got married, it wasn't me comparing this marriage and how things are going versus the way that I think that they ought to be going, or me having anybody chirp in my head about, the negativities of maybe not having you home or how perhaps you were treating me or like so any of those things. It was just kind of us. We got married and we kind of were growing up together. We were growing into our early adulthood together. And when we decided to get married, we decided to make that commitment as a team. And so that required us to operate as a team. And I remember specifically having to turn to you in a vehicle and tell you at one point, Clint, we are on the same team when things weren't going so great. And, maybe we had a disagreement about something. And I think having those conversations and just being very blunt about, being on the same team. How can we make sure we're wearing the same jerseys? How can we make sure that we're performing the same plays? Like all of these conversations need to take place regularly.
And I think another factor to really consider when it comes down to it is what if you have a spouse that's a first responder and you're staying at home and you're doing stuff around the house and you're holding that house together, what do you have for yourself too? What are you working towards? Are you always only waiting and kind of laying in wait for your spouse to come home and not having anything for yourself, but being able to move out of your own comfort zone and have something to always work towards?
Yeah, and I think that sometimes that spouse, maybe all they need is to just be acknowledged for those things. And you might be in the danger zone when you get to the situation where your spouse has completely stopped asking for help because the answers were never reliable from you anytime that they had before.
Yeah, and I think that's where, you fell in love and you started this life together, and it's being able to kind of diagnose, okay, where did this start shifting from where I'm not only respecting my spouse, but being able to love and support them and being on the same team when it comes to it, like you said. And
just communicating. Clint, I had to tell you last week, Clint, this is a behavior that has been taking place for the past 9 months or so, and it's starting to irk me to where it's gotten onto my pet peeves list. We need to work on that. And, I am very OCD in a lot of aspects. I know a lot of people like to just throw that word out there, but there's like some chronic areas of my life where, and so that you were invading into that sort of territory. And so I was very blunt with you. You perhaps didn't like me being so blunt, but those types of behaviors are the types of things that if you're not verbalizing it to your partner, then things are never going to change. And then you start to hold resentment. And I specifically told that to you last week. Yeah.
And what happens when, we can't always guess what's going on with our spouses. What if there's something bothering them, if there's something going on, and like, especially in the first responder realm, like, it helps us. Do we always like hearing that blunt statement of this is bothering me and you're the root cause of this? No, it's never easy hearing that. But if you don't have that, if you're not receiving that information, how are you ever going to fix a problem that you don't know about? And that's where the communication is so key, and being able to talk and support one another in those instances and work on it to be on the same team is super important.
Yeah, and I think too, it's important to understand that their exhaustion and yours is not a competition.
Yeah, and I think when we start saying, well, I'm more tired than you should be doing this for me, and vice versa, we start holding on to that resentment more and more. And that's where we should try building each other up more and more and say, okay, what can I do more to alleviate that on both sides? I
feel like you and I have the opposite problem. We try to like compete with each other to
I know.
Like, what can I do for him today?
Mm-hmm. And I love that about us, because it's something that really, like, it motivates us to keep moving forward, to be able to help one another, and having those little avenues of surprise, or being able to support and love each other in that dynamic. I love that.
Me too. I hope you've gotten some value out of today's episode. If you have, do us a favor, drop a review, subscribe down below. And as always, know that I'm sending you a long, tight hug from my home to yours.